Amidst the relentless downpour and the hollow echo of her footsteps, she burst into the dimly lit apartment to confront him, the man whose secret letters now lay like splintered shards of truth on the table. Furious, her eyes blazed with jealousy as each whispered accusation cut through the heavy silence, igniting raw, unbridled emotion. With the betrayal laid bare before her, she stood trembling on the edge of a momentous choice: to unmask every hidden lie or surrender to the storm of deceit consuming their once sacred bond. Chapter 1. Before the Storm. It was one of those afternoons when the sky wore a somber shade of gray, its melancholy seeping into every corner of the lonely city apartment. I sat by the window, my gaze caught between the relentless drizzle outside and the uneven ticking of an old clock on the wall. In the quiet despair of my solitude, I wondered if there ever really was a place for love in a world that seemed to delight in isolation. I was careful to bury myself in the small comforts of routine: a cup of tea with just the right hint of mint, a soft sweater pulled close to shield against the chill, and the promise of quiet companionship. When he arrived, a gentle knock, a soft smile, and the warmth of his presence in an otherwise barren space, everything seemed, if only for a fleeting moment, to promise stability. Marcus, with his quiet charm and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, was the antithesis of the storm raging outside. In the brief minutes before he left, we exchanged smiles that were both tender and lightened with unspoken stories. Over a shared meal at the small table in my cramped kitchen, his laughter mingled with mine, and for an instant, the heaviness of the day was dispelled. His light banter, and the playful teasing about how I always managed to overfill my teacup, created a gentle intimacy that I cherished dearly. Yet, even in these treasured moments, a subtle disquiet threaded through my thoughts. I couldn't pinpoint where it originated. Perhaps it was the way his eyes flickered away when our conversation grew too personal, or the half-hidden secrets that seemed to lurk behind his easy smiles. At times, in the silences that fell between our banter, I saw something unsaid shimmer in his gaze, like a half-remembered dream that refused to be fully grasped. It could easily have been the lingering chill of an old habit or some half-whispered wish of his own, but as the sky darkened ominously, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was not entirely forthcoming. After dinner, as the room filled with the soft hum of the city that moved relentlessly despite the gloom, Marcus drew near. We stood by the window, watching the wind pick up, and the first flickers of lightning trace faint scars in the clouds. "You really do love these storms, don't you?" he said with a gentle teasing lilt. I met his eyes, searching for the comfort they held, yet finding in them an elusive intensity that made my heart quicken. "They remind me that beauty often comes in the midst of chaos," I replied, voice soft and tinged with quiet wonder. The statement, meant to be a celebration of life's paradoxes, instead felt like a prelude to something unsaid. His hand reached for mine, the gesture a tender vow that, despite the encroaching darkness outside, we were still sheltering in a moment of shared warmth. Our fingers interlaced, and when he brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear, the world fell quiet for a moment. The kiss that followed was soft, a whisper of connection that held the sweetness of promise yet left behind the bitterness of unanswered questions. Even as the warmth between us grew, so too did the sense that the tranquility was merely a calm before an inevitable storm. I found myself replaying every glance, every subtle laugh, searching for hidden meanings in the gentle rhythm of his gestures. The room, once a cocoon of solace, now felt like a stage upon which our futures were quietly, reluctantly unfolding. In the gathering dusk, the pitter-patter of the rain mingled with the unspoken words between us. Marcus pulled away from our tender moment with a hesitancy that left my heart fluttering with both hope and apprehension. As I stood alone later that night, the half-light of the city filtering through drawn curtains, I couldn't dismiss the nagging suspicion that something crucial lay buried beneath his layered charms, a secret that might unravel the fragile tapestry of our budding love. I paced the familiar confines of my apartment, the solitary echo of my footsteps underscoring the uncertainty that had taken root. Outside, the storm was gathering strength. Inside, malaise and anticipation swirled together, inseparable and unyielding. I wondered if I was merely chasing an illusion, a love that seemed genuine yet was marked by subtle cracks, hints of more hidden behind his smiles. Questions swirled in my mind without answers to anchor them. Was I another chapter in a story he was not yet ready to tell? And so, as the first heavy raindrops began to drum a more insistent beat against the window, I stood at the precipice, uncertain yet yearning for the truth, even if it meant facing the tempest that was lurking on the horizon. There was something about the storm outside that mirrored the turbulence in my heart, a silent promise that everything was about to change, and that I might soon learn if this love was just a mirage on the edge of darkness, or the beginning of something real. In that charged silence, as the wind whispered secrets through the cracks in the old walls, I braced myself for the storm that was to come. Chapter 2. Hidden Missives. The storm had taken command of the night, its fury a relentless chorus that pounded against the window panes and rattled the very core of my apartment's walls. I sat curled up on the worn sofa, the violent crashes of thunder echoing the tumult of emotions swirling inside me. Every flash of lightning seemed to sketch memories of love and trust, moments I had once held so dear, against the bruised sky of my heart. In the solitude that the tempest imposed, when even the usual hum of the city was muffled by nature's wrath, I sought a distraction from the disquiet seething within me. Reaching for a battered box tucked away on the shelf, one filled with relics of happier times, I didn't expect what I was about to unearth. Hidden behind a collection of faded photographs and trinkets was a bundle of letters, their envelopes delicate and whisper-thin, as if they had been secreted away for too long. My trembling fingers fumbled with the seal, peeling it open with a cautious apprehension that belied my racing heart. With each letter I unfolded, a narrative of betrayal began to weave itself along my skin. The ink, though faint, was unmistakably the hurried scrawl of a lover's hand, my lover's hand. The words, once imbued with poetic longing and promises of forever, now stung with a venomous truth. Each letter revealed the clandestine contours of another romance, a second life that existed tangentially to what I had believed to be our sacred bond. In one missive, he described secret meetings under dim streetlights in a tone that was tender yet disturbing in its double-edged sincerity. In another, he recounted moments of passion that, until now, I had never glimpsed, but sensed from subtle absences and unexplained silences. As I absorbed the words, the letters began to shout at me in the silence of my apartment, shouting of deceit, of bittersweet lies, of a love that was not exclusively mine. Memories of our shared moments flickered painfully through my mind. I recalled our stolen glances during long, quiet walks, when promises were made without uttering the words, forever, and the warmth in his embrace that had once convinced me of our eternal unity. Now each recollection felt like an echo of a fantasy, tainted by the cold, harsh light of betrayal. The same hands that had once tenderly caressed my face were the ones that had sought solace elsewhere. Outside, the unforgiving storm mirrored the chaos that churned within. The steady drumming of rain against the windows, the electric crackle of lightning that split the sky, all served as a brutal reminder of the dual nature of passion, its power to both nurture and destroy. I tried desperately to reconcile the images in my mind, the cherished photos of laughter and gentle whispers, against the stark admission laid bare on paper. How could the same heart that had once spoken of unconditional love harbor such hidden desires? In moments of painful clarity, I revisited the very memories that had once painted my world in brilliant colors. I remembered the sultry summer evenings when our shadows danced together, the soft murmur of his voice promising delightful tomorrows. I had carried these memories as tokens, believing them to be the bedrock of our future. Now, with each read of a letter, that foundation crumbled, replaced with the jagged shards of betrayal that cut deep with every astronomical realization. The cold truth of those secret encounters was undeniable. My lover had crafted a life that I had never known existed. Tears welled up as I sat, clutching the letters with clammy hands, feeling their paper textures against my skin, as if they were the final, icy caress of a departing lover. The rawness of the revelation left me momentarily numb, caught between the solace of familiar words and the shock of their true meaning. In the disconcerting silence punctuated only by nature's relentless fury, every thunderclap was a reminder that the past can never be reclaimed once the present has shattered its illusions. I knew that these hidden missives were far more than just words on paper. They were windows into a life I could never have imagined, a mirror that reflected a stark and unforgiving truth. They laid bare the lies that had woven themselves into the tapestry of what I deemed a perfect love. And as the storm raged on outside, its ferocity mirroring the upheaval within me, I realized that the road ahead would demand more than just the quiet contemplation of a broken heart. It would require confronting a future irrevocably altered by the betrayal now plainly inscribed in every line. In that charged moment, The quiet confession of paper against my skin was both a damning verdict and a painful liberation. The letters, though steeped in dishonesty, had awakened a raw resilience inside me. I knew that clinging to pretense had become as futile as battling the storm. The revelation would mark a turning point, one that promised to dissolve the illusions of yesterday and forge a new understanding of self in the wreckage of what I once believed in. Chapter 3. Clash of Hearts. The rain thrashed the windows with a relentless fury as she paced her small living room, each step echoing the beating of a heart filled with both dread and determination. In the distance, the tapping of rain on the pavement always held a strange comfort, a reminder that even in the harshest of storms, nature continued its rhythm. But tonight, that same rain felt like a drum signaling an inevitable collision. A sudden, insistent rap on the door shattered her reverie. She stood frozen for a breathless moment before hesitating. Her mind raced. Who could possibly have the nerve to show up unannounced on such a night? With trembling fingers, she unlatched the door to reveal him, soaked to the bone, his eyes wild, and a pain in his expression mirroring the turmoil in her own heart. He had never barged in like this before, yet it was not entirely unexpected. His two timing ways had spread whispers like wildfire, and tonight, the palpable tension was almost suffocating. Without the preamble of cautious greetings, his eyes locked onto hers, and they exploded into a barrage of accusations. "How could you just leave me without an explanation?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of betrayal and hurt. His silence haunted the gap between words, the storm outside echoing the chaos inside them. The air was thick with the sense of wet earth and a love that had turned sour, each drop of rain a reminder of promises broken and trust shattered. For a long moment, all that could be heard was the furious beat of the torrents outside, as if nature itself mourned their broken bond. Then, his voice, low and laden with guilt, finally emerged. "I never meant to hurt you." "Never meant," she snapped, steeping closer as if to draw the hidden truths from him. "Every lie, every excuse, every stolen moment you've had, do they mean nothing at all to you?" Her words were both a challenge and a desperate plea for an explanation, torn between the love that once felt eternal and the pain that now smoldered in her chest like burning embers. He flinched, the vulnerability in his eyes betraying the web of deceit he had spun. His confession was half-formed, scattered amidst sobs that betrayed years of ambivalence and regret. As they circled each other like wounded animals, the room became a confessional of anger, sorrow, and longing. Both tried to justify the chaos, to find a shred of reason beneath the rubble of their shattered romance. She recalled the soft promises and quiet laughs of better times, which now clashed violently with the bitter taste of betrayal masked behind every word he uttered. The argument escalated, voices overlapping like crashing waves, each syllable propelled by years of suppressed anguish. Silence fell as quickly as it had been torn apart, thick and unbearable. For a suspended moment, they were simply two souls standing in the eye of an emotional hurricane, each presence a mix of defiance and vulnerability. And then it happened. In the midst of the torrent, both outside and within, the memory of their better days surged forth, carried on the edge of a desperate impulse. An emotion that felt both inevitable and utterly reckless, they converged in a tumultuous, conflicted kiss. It was a collision of passion and pain, a mingling of forgiveness and fury. Her lips met his in a desperate embrace that spoke of deep-seated love and searing betrayal all at once. It was as if for a few stolen moments, the torrential rain outside had merged with the tempest inside her, obscuring the line between right and wrong, love and treachery. Even as the kiss deepened, the electric tension between them remained unmistakable, a reminder that their connection was as complex as it was doomed from the start. Each caress echoed with both lingering tenderness and the ghost of promises that had long been broken. The kiss, however passionate, was weighted with the sorrow of unspoken words and the enormity of their mutual failures. In that moment, all they had was the raw, unfiltered emotion of two wounded hearts, desperately clinging to something that might never be repaired. Slowly, as if waking from a dream, they parted. The reality of their predicament rushed back, harsher than the cold gusts that whipped against the walls. Blood still pounding in her ears, She stared at him with a mixture of hope and bitter recognition, silently questioning whether this kiss could ever undo the scars of their past. Outside, the storm showed no signs of relenting, a perpetual downpour that mirrored their inner chaos and the ruthless passage of time. In the shadowed silence that followed, they both knew that the confrontation was far from over. The passionate kiss had been a brief, haunting pause, a flash of their former intimacy intertwined with the jagged edges of deceit. For now they stood on that delicate, precarious threshold, where love and betrayal danced a relentless waltz, each step leaving them more entangled in both the beauty and the tragedy of their own making. Chapter 4. Unmasked Truths. The wild wind battered the apartment's windows as if nature itself were echoing the tumult within. Outside, the storm escalated steadily, its relentless howling paralleling the agitation that had long simmered between them. In the sparsely lit living room, every object, every breath seemed charged with tension, the calm before a revelation that promised to shatter everything. Amelia stood by the rain-streaked window, her eyes fixed on the dark horizon as torrents of water blurred the city lights. The flicker of lightning illuminated the room with crisp, unyielding moments, each flash a vivid reminder that nothing could remain hidden for much longer. She had gathered every ounce of courage, drawn from earlier whispers of discontent and the growing chill that had invaded her heart, to face the one secret that had silently unraveled the tapestry of their shared life. Across the room, Daniel's presence was subdued yet heavy, as though he were bearing a burden too immense to be distilled into words. His features, usually so eager to smile, were now drawn into a mask of remorse and resignation. The silence between them was punctured only by the erratic drum of rain on the windowpane, a relentless reminder of the truth that would soon burst forth like the storm itself. Amelia's voice cut through the clamor of the weather as she spoke, measured yet laced with pain. Daniel, I need you to be honest, completely honest. With me, I can no longer live in the haze of doubts and half-truths. The time has come for every shadow and every light to stand in the light. Her words trembled between resolve and vulnerability, her eyes searching his in a desperate plea for clarity, for something to anchor the fragments of her breaking trust. Daniel's silence was deep. For a long moment he looked away, his gaze falling to his trembling hands. The weight of unspoken truths pressed on him, and he knew that the storm outside was but a reflection of the storm raging within his guilty soul. Slowly, with the kind of hesitation that marked the final surrender of pride, he began to speak. What started in a halting murmur grew, buoyed by a tide of regret and the crushing certainty that there was no escape from the truth he had long avoided. Amelia, he began, his voice raw and unsteady as the wind outside, I've been living a lie, not just to you, but to myself. I thought that by compartmentalizing, I could protect us both. I led a double life, a life that was vibrant and reckless on one side, while I clung to the safe, predictable version of us on the other. I was unfaithful, not only with words, but with actions that of it, the promises we made. His confession poured out with a force that seemed to mirror the storm's unbridled energy, a torrent of admissions that left no room for further deceit. As Daniel bared his soul, Amelia felt an onslaught of emotions collide within her, the aching residue of love intertwined with an overwhelming surge of jealousy and betrayal. Every whispered secret, every moment of closeness now carried the bitter aftertaste of lies. The memories they had built together splintered before her eyes, and the steady pulse of her heart was replaced by a silent numbness. In that pivotal instant, all the illusions that had once cushioned their imperfect love fell away, leaving an irreparable fissure in the foundation of their relationship. Her internal struggle was torturous. Even as a part of her mourned for the man who had once held promises of forever, another part seethed with the poisonous sting of betrayal. She felt raw, exposed, as if her very soul had been laid bare for him to dissect. The conversation, once a hope for healing, now morphed into an unyielding confrontation with reality, a final reckoning of a bond that had run its course. In the midst of the relentless storm, Amelia's voice was both frozen in disbelief and scorched with anger. I trusted you, Daniel. I believed in us and the future we built together. Now, your words have shattered everything. Every small hope and every grand dream. How do I look at you, knowing that all this time, you were a stranger to me as well as to yourself? Her words, though quietly spoken, carried the weight of a soul that was irrevocably altered. Daniel's eyes, heavy with regret, met hers. The admission had stripped him of any remaining defenses, leaving him vulnerable in the wake of absolute truth. Under the oppressive sky, their shared reality disintegrated, a mirror shattering into countless irretrievable pieces. And as the storm raged on outside, Amelia recognized that what lay ahead was not merely a path paved with sorrow, but a journey toward the painful, uncharted realm of self-reckoning and ultimately, liberation. Chapter 5. After the Rain. The sky had worn its last tear, leaving behind a calm that felt as raw as the memories scattered throughout her once sacred space. In the quiet aftermath, the apartment that had borne witness to fervent declarations and shattered promises now lay in somber repose, an echo of a love turned deceptive. For a long time, every corner of this room had held the residue of passion and betrayal alike. Now, as she stepped through the threshold one final time, her footsteps stirred the dust of past indiscretions, each movement affirming her decision to let go. In the living room, slivers of light fought their way through drawn curtains, painting the walls with subdued hope rather than despair. The tracks of water, remnants of the storm, had long dried, but the scars on the floor seemed to whisper tales of tumultuous nights and whispered secrets. Where once laughter and fiery debates had resonated, there now existed a deep stillness, a space for reflection, one last tribute to what had been. Leaning against the cool, bare wall, she closed her eyes, revisiting every moment that had led her here. The initial spark of passion, the slow encroachment of doubt, and finally the heart-wrenching betrayal that had punctuated the tempest of their shared life. Gathering the courage that grew within her heart with every passing day of solitude, she began to clear the tangible remnants of that doomed relationship. Each item she encountered, a photo frayed at the edges, a book whose pages still retained whispered stories of better days, became a symbol of the chapters she was finally ready to close. As her fingers traced the worn surfaces and delicate imprints of memory, a strange serenity took hold. It was not the empty resignation of defeat, but an empowered, deliberate act of choosing herself over a tainted love. The finality of that clearing ritual was marked by the quiet act of shutting the door behind her. In that decisive moment, the apartment ceased to be a mausoleum of lost time and instead transformed into a monument of her resilience. The very air that once carried echoes of endless disputes now hummed with the promise of renewal. Despite the weight of historical scars, there surfaced a tangible hope, a conviction that from the wreckage of betrayal personal strength could emerge anew. Stepping out into the cool embrace of the evening, she glanced back only once. The building, with its peeling paint and unfixed fixtures, bore the silent testimony of a love that had once been all-consuming. But it also symbolized a transformation. The walls, murky with the residue of storm water and old tears, were now a canvas for her future. In these final reflective moments, she grasped the truth that healing was not instantaneous, but a slow, deliberate journey where each step away from the ruins was a step toward rediscovering herself. As she walked down the quiet corridor of the building, memories mingled with the soft patter of distant rain, a companion in her contemplative solitude. Every stride was an act of bold defiance against the gravity of sorrow. The uncertainties of tomorrow were cast aside by the simple fact that she was no longer willing to be defined by the deception of a tainted love. Instead, she embraced a future where self-worth became the foundation upon which new dreams would be built. While the clique of unresolved tensions and painful recollections still danced in the periphery of her thoughts, she had learned to welcome them as old acquaintances rather than tyrants of her destiny. The heartaches, the moments of blind trust, and even the despair held dual roles, as harsh mentors and as catalysts for personal transformation. She understood that her journey of self-healing was not a linear path, but a delicate interplay between the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. In a modest cafe that overlooked the quiet street, she finally paused. Over a warm cup of coffee, she allowed herself a brief moment of indulgence, recognizing the symbolic transition from the ruins of a life once entwined with betrayal into one of solitary, steadfast purpose. Here, in the soft glow of twilight, she had started to weave the threads of a future defined by resilience, self-discovery, and hope. Each sip of coffee reminded her that every end holds within it the seed of a rebirth, a new life that balances both the beauty and the heartbreak of memory. Now, looking ahead with eyes unburdened by the weight of what had been, she resolved to honor every lesson learned. While the whispers of the past would occasionally call her back, they no longer held the power to dictate her future. Instead, they underscored a quiet promise that she was worth more than any transient passion or deceptive embrace. Here, in the tender space after the storm, she reclaimed her narrative and stepped boldly into a future where self-worth and resilience